Hi, my name's Amanda Phillips.
Hi, my name is Ricardo Ortiz.
In terms of my gender identity, I identify as queer, also trans and non-binary. Born in the U.S., so that makes me an American, but I am half Mexican.
I identify as Latinx, although I also will say Latino when I need to specify my gender identity, which is male, masculine. I'm Cuban American, so I was born in Cuba.
Today, I'm here to talk about gender and Latinidad.
And I'm here today to talk about gender identity in the Spanish language. Each one of these terms really does have a kind of historical, political, ideological, cultural, personal meaning that really depends on the moment that it's used, depends on the context within which it's used. So whether Hispanic is used by a census project to count people in a population that it wants to identify that way, if Latino sort of comes up because many people don't find themselves called or named by the term Hispanic because they're not of Spanish origin themselves, racially or culturally or ethnically, there's a reason why we need to say Latino too. At the same time, that Latino comes from a kind of misnaming of the Southern Hemisphere of the New World as Latin America, as though that Latinization was somehow less European and somehow less, in its own way, colonial and imperial than Hispanic. So they're all complicated, they're all messy. None of them is perfect, but they all do some useful work for us. And if they didn't, we wouldn't keep using them.
So that's definitely one of the arguments that if we're centering English, we're centering a colonial language. One of the counter arguments to that is like Spanish itself is a colonial language. And I know particularly amongst Mexican or Chicano queers, another counter argument is that like, well, X is part of indigenous languages in Mexico, and therefore it's not colonial at all. It's like taking us back to this sort of like decolonial thing. I think none of these are the entire truth, right? Like you can never get to, the one true meaning of the X, which is why the conversation is so important, right? These can all be true at the same time.
Using one term to describe a multiplicity of heritages and cultures is difficult because it's impossible, because there's no way really functionally, right, that everyone's going to be called by one term, and we don't want that. I think at some point we look at one another and say, we are both this, but we should be able to agree that that's the case, as opposed to somebody coming at us and going, you are both that. That's different. And I think that's where the problems, generally speaking, lie.
When you build a community, you also in some ways build a wall. And so this is something that a lot of folks encounter in, questions of trans communities, for example. Am I trans enough to be a part of this community? Am I Latinx enough to be part of the Latinx community? There are reasons to be protective of who enters a community, for safety, right? For a sense of belonging, to sort of like, it feels good to have something in common with the people who are surrounding you. And so I think it's really a double-edged sword. A lot of folks have found their home, but a lot of folks have also found reasons to be anxious about claiming identities as well.
Identity, like language, has never been fixed, will never be concrete, will never be transcendental. It can only ever be changing and fluid and flexible and versatile, and hopefully allow us enough of a space that we can live our lives the way that we'd like, and in ways that make us more human, more ourselves, and only as much like one another as we'd like to be.
I think it's really great that these conversations are always happening. I think it's really great that the terminology keeps changing. My only hope is that we can continue to have conversations and to be flexible and open, and really sort of attentive to particularly the most marginalized folks in groups who are telling us, right, like this doesn't feel like it belongs to me, even though I really feel like I'm a part of this group. And so it's always important to listen to those voices and be open to change.